Hi, this is Gary Burghoff. The Burghoff, Boostrom, and Westfall families wanted to open a GoFundMe account to benefit those affected by the Camp Fire.
At 83, Gary Burghoff is still remembered by millions as Radar O'Reilly from MASH. But behind the famous character was a man who reached a point where the success of the show was no longer enough to keep him there. After 7 seasons, Burghoff walked away from MASH, leaving many fans wondering why he would leave such a huge hit. His decision was connected to his family, his demanding work schedule, and the pressure of being known everywhere as Radar. So, what really made Gary Burghoff walk away from MASH at the height of his fame? Join us to find out. Why Gary Burghoff walked away from MASH. For many MASH fans, Gary Burghoff leaving the show after its 7th season was a painful moment. He had played Radar O'Reilly from the beginning of the television series, and the character had become one of the most familiar faces in the show. Radar was not simply another member of the cast. He had become a major part of what made MASH special. So when Burghoff decided to leave, many fans wondered if they had really seen the last of him. That question became even more interesting when Burghoff returned during the 8th season to film a special 2-part farewell episode. Some fans wondered whether he might continue making occasional appearances, perhaps returning for 1 or 2 episodes each year. There was a similar example with Don Knotts on The Andy Griffith Show, so the idea did not seem impossible. But Burghoff had made a much bigger decision. He did not want to continue with the day-to-day demands of the television industry. By the time Burghoff reached his 3rd season on MASH, the pressure of the show had already become difficult. He renegotiated his contract so that he would only have to appear in 13 of the next 24 episodes of each season. This gave him some relief from the demanding schedule, but it did not completely solve the problem. As the years passed, the work continued to take a heavy toll. By the 7th season, Burghoff had become deeply burned out. The long schedule had affected his personal life and his relationships. He was exhausted and wanted to step away from the constant demands of the show. In a 1982 interview with the Courier Daily, he described himself as burned out, overloaded, tired, and irritable. He also explained that he no longer knew how he felt and needed to return to things he knew were real. For Burghoff, the problem was not only the amount of work. There was another difficulty that followed him everywhere. People had become so used to seeing him as Radar that they often struggled to separate the actor from the character. Wherever Burghoff appeared, people wanted Radar O'Reilly. They expected the same personality they had seen on MASH. His face had become strongly connected to the character, and that made it difficult for him to establish a separate identity. He had played Radar in both the original film and the television series, making the connection even stronger. Burghoff was Gary, but to many people, he was Radar. That confusion could follow him even when he was away from the set. People would address him by a name that was not his, and expect him to behave like a character he had played. For an actor trying to build a life outside one famous role, that could become another burden. At the same time, Burghoff was dealing with serious concerns about his family. While he was away from home filming MASH, a California brush fire came dangerously close to his wife and daughter. The fire reached Burghoff's ranch property. His family was at home while he was away working, leaving him separated from the people he cared about most during a frightening situation. Fortunately, firefighters managed to stop the fire before it reached the house. According to the TV Week magazine article provided, the flames stopped just short of the back door. The situation left Burghoff with a serious realization. He could spend long periods away from his family because of work, but there was no guarantee that his family would always be safe while he was gone. The fire had come close enough to show him how quickly circumstances could change. For Burghoff, that mattered deeply. He had already been struggling with the demands of MASH and the effect the work was having on his personal life. Now he had another reason to question whether remaining on the show was worth the cost. He eventually decided that his family needed to come first. Burghoff left MASH in 1979 after the 7th season. The decision was not easy, especially because Radar had become such an important character and the series remained extremely successful. But Burghoff believed he needed to step away from the daily pressure and spend more time with his family. He later explained that family had become the most important thing to him. His work had made him unavailable as a father, and he understood that simply stopping work would not immediately solve everything. Even when families went out together, public recognition could interrupt their time together. His identity as Radar continued to follow him outside the television set. Burghoff's departure also surprised some of his fellow cast members. Mike Farrell tried to persuade him to stay. Farrell pointed to the careers of former MASH regulars Larry Linville and McLean Stevenson after they had left the series. He wanted Burghoff to think carefully before walking away from such a successful show. But Burghoff had already reached his decision. His choice also showed how different success can look from the outside. Millions of people knew MASH as a successful television show, but Burghoff experienced the demanding schedule behind that success. For him, the long hours and constant work had become too much. Mike Farrell later spoke highly of Burghoff as an actor. He considered him possibly the best actor in the company and admired his ability to find small details in a performance that made his characters feel real. That praise helps explain why Burghoff's departure affected the show so strongly. Radar was not memorable simply because he was part of a successful series. Burghoff had built the character carefully, giving him a distinct personality that separated him from the other members of the cast. Still, Burghoff knew that continuing under those conditions was no longer right for him. His return during the following season gave the show a chance to properly say goodbye to Radar. The special two-part farewell episode, Goodbye Radar, allowed the character to receive a departure rather than simply disappearing from the story. The episode had originally been planned as the final episode of the 7th season, but CBS extended it into a two-part episode for the November sweeps during the following season. For fans, seeing Radar leave was difficult because Burghoff had been part of MASH from its beginning on television. His departure marked the end of an important part of the show. For Burghoff, however, leaving was about more than television. He had reached a point where work had taken too much of his time and affected too much of his personal life. The experience with the brush fire had made the importance of being close to his family even clearer. He chose to walk away from a role that had made him famous because he wanted more time for the people closest to him. It was a difficult decision, but Burghoff believed it was the right one. Gary Burghoff after MASH. After leaving MASH, Gary Burghoff did not completely disappear from television. Instead, he became more careful about the work he accepted. Whenever he felt that a job could fit into his life without taking too much time away from his family, he was willing to return to the small screen. This allowed him to continue working while keeping the balance he had wanted when he left MASH. One of his most noticeable returns came through Radar O'Reilly. When After MASH began, Burghoff brought the character back for 2 appearances during the show's first season. For fans who had watched him leave MASH, seeing Radar again was a chance to reconnect with a character they already knew. But Radar's story did not end there. Around the same time, Burghoff filmed a pilot for a possible spin-off called Walter. The idea was to take Radar O'Reilly in a completely different direction. In the proposed series, Radar had become a member of the St. Louis Police Department. The pilot aired in July of 1984, but the proposed series did not continue. Even though Walter did not become a regular television show, it showed that the Radar character was still being considered for another chapter after MASH. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Burghoff made several television appearances. He appeared on game shows including Match Game, Tattletales, Liars Club, Hollywood Squares, and Show-Offs. These appearances allowed audiences to see him outside the role that had made him famous. He also continued taking acting jobs. His credits included the film B.S. I Love You, along with appearances in The Love Boat and Ellery Queen. These projects were different from MASH, giving Burghoff opportunities to appear in other settings and formats. Television also brought him into advertising. During the 1980s, Burghoff became a television spokesman for BP Gasoline and IBM Computers. Later, in 2000, he became a spokesman for PriceRadar.com, a .com-era auction aggregation website. Although Burghoff continued to work from time to time, entertainment was no longer the center of his life. He also spent time developing interests outside acting. Painting and music became important hobbies for him, giving him other ways to spend his time. Fishing was another major interest. Burghoff was an avid fisherman and even held patents for a couple of inventions connected to the sport. His interest in fishing was not simply something he did occasionally. It became one of the activities he continued to pursue away from television. He was also an avid stamp collector. These hobbies gave Burghoff a life that was separate from the entertainment industry and from the character of Radar O'Reilly. For many years, Burghoff continued to keep his attention on his family and his own well-being. From 1995 to 2010, he stayed away from the entertainment industry entirely. This was not because he had turned against show business. Instead, he had chosen to step away on his own terms. That decision was different from simply losing interest in acting. Burghoff had already experienced the demands that came with being part of a major television series. He knew what the entertainment business could require from him, and he did not want to return to a schedule that would take away the time he wanted for his personal life. So he remained away for years. His long break lasted until 2010, when Burghoff briefly returned to acting. He appeared in a faith-based film called Daniel's Lot. The movie centered on a man whose life had reached a difficult point. His marriage was in trouble, his finances were in ruin, and he had to decide whether to sell valuable property that had belonged to his late father. The story then moved toward a change in the man's priorities. After meeting a local pastor, he was encouraged to reconsider the direction of his life and follow God's plan. Burghoff played the pastor who becomes part of that important moment. The film marked Burghoff's return to the entertainment industry after years away. His appearance was brief in the larger story of his career, but it was significant because he had spent so much time away from acting. By then, Burghoff's relationship with entertainment had changed. Earlier in his career, television had demanded a great deal of his time. MASH had made him widely known, and Radar O'Reilly had become strongly connected to his identity. After leaving the series, however, he became much more selective about when and where he worked. His occasional television appearances in the 1980s and early 1990s showed that he had not completely closed the door on acting. He could still return when a project suited his life. His appearances as Radar also allowed fans to see the character again, while projects such as Walter explored what Radar might have become outside MASH. But his later years showed that Burghoff wanted more than a career built around television. He developed hobbies, spent time with his family, and stayed away from the entertainment business for a long period. When he finally returned in 2010 for Daniel's Lot, it was not a full return to the busy career he had once known. It was a brief appearance after years away. His career after MASH was not about constantly staying in the spotlight. It was about choosing when to step into it and when to walk away. So what was his life like beyond the camera and applause? Let's find out. About the show. In 1970, MASH arrived as a film about doctors and medical staff working inside a Mobile Army surgical hospital during the Korean War. The story followed military medical workers whose lives mixed serious surgery, dark situations, and comedy. Although the Korean War was the setting, the film also carried a connection to the Vietnam War, which was a current event when the movie was made. The film became one of the biggest successes of the early 1970s for 20th Century Fox. It starred Donald Sutherland, Tom Skerritt, and Elliott Gould, along with Sally Kellerman, Robert Duvall, Renee Auberjonois, Gary Burghoff, Roger Bowen, and Michael Murphy. Professional football player Fred Williamson also appeared in his film debut. The film quickly attracted attention because it could move between humor and serious wartime situations without leaving its setting. The cast helped give the story its unusual balance. MASH received major recognition. It won the Grand Prix at the 1970 Cannes Film Festival, an award later named the Palme d'Or. The film received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and 1 Best Adapted Screenplay. In 1996, the Library of Congress selected MASH for preservation in the National Film Registry because it was considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The Academy Film Archive preserved the film in 2000. The movie did not have an easy relationship with the military. After the film was shown to a panel, the Army and Air Force Motion Picture Service initially banned it from Army and Air Force base theaters. The reason given was that the movie reflected unfavorably on the armed services. The film inspired the television series MASH, which began in 1972 and ran for 11 seasons before ending in 1983. The television version became the best-known part of the MASH story and one of the highest-rated shows in American television history. The television series began with Alan Alda as Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce and Wayne Rogers as Trapper John McIntyre. They were joined by Larry Linville as Surgeon Frank Burns and Loretta Swift as head nurse Margaret Hotlips Houlihan. McLean Stevenson played Company Commander Henry Blake, while Gary Burghoff played Company Clerk Walter Radar O'Reilly. Jamie Farr played Orderly Maxwell Klinger, and William Christopher played Chaplain Father John Mulcahy. As the years passed, the cast changed. Wayne Rogers left and was replaced by Mike Farrell, who played B.J. Honeycutt. McLean Stevenson was replaced by Harry Morgan, who played Sherman Potter. Larry Linville was replaced by David Ogden Steers, who played Charles Emerson Winchester III. When Gary Burghoff left the series, Maxwell Klinger moved into the company clerk role. The changes did not stop the series from keeping its central identity. Longtime supporting cast members included Kelly Nakahara, Jeff Maxwell, Johnny Hamer, Alan Arbus, Edward Winter, and G.W. Bailey. One actor connected the film and television versions in a way no other major television cast member did. Gary Burghoff played Radar O'Reilly in the television series, and he was the only member of the television cast to appear in the 1970 film. Radar was the company clerk, but his role meant much more than handling paperwork. He became one of the central figures around the unit, and, in many ways, the heart of the show. While several other characters used sarcasm and cynicism to deal with the emotional weight of their experiences, Radar approached the world differently. He still had a sense of innocence. Radar's innocence made him different from many of the people around him. His role gave the series another clear point of view for viewers watching closely. Burghoff played Radar as naive without making him seem dumb. Radar wanted to see the good in people and situations around him. The series became known for changing its tone. Some stories were broad and funny, while others were tragic and serious. The styles came from the changing writing staff and sources used to shape the stories. Actor Alan Alda contributed to the writing, and surgeons who had served in the Korean War also provided material that helped shape the series. Even the opening credits kept a connection to the original movie. The show used an instrumental version of another movie, which had been the theme song of the film. The show came from an unusual path. An attempt to film the sequel to the original book, MASH Goes to Maine, had failed. The television series became the version that reached the largest audience and remained on television for more than a decade. The series ended with Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. From 1983 until 2010, it was the most-watched television broadcast in the United States. It remains the most-watched finale of any television series and the most-watched episode of a scripted series. Gary Burghoff's connection to both versions made Radar especially important to the history of MASH. He was the only major television actor to carry the same character from the film into the series. But who was Gary? Stay with us. Gary Burghoff. Gary Burghoff's career began long before audiences knew him as Radar O'Reilly on MASH. He worked in theater, music, and television before becoming part of one of the most successful shows in American television history. His path to MASH was shaped by early stage work, his skills as a drummer, and his growing experience as an actor. Burghoff was born in Bristol, Connecticut. His family later moved to Clinton, Connecticut, and then to Delavan, Wisconsin. While growing up, he developed an interest in performing. He studied tap dance and also became a drummer. He was born with brachydactyly caused by Poland syndrome, which left 3 fingers on his left hand significantly smaller than the fingers on his right hand. Despite this, he developed his musical skills and became an accomplished drummer. His early acting experience came with the Belfry Players of Williams Bay, Wisconsin. This gave him a chance to work on stage and build his confidence as a performer. He later received acting training at HB Studio in New York City, where he continued developing his skills. In 1967, Burghoff took an important step in his acting career when he portrayed Charlie Brown in the original off-Broadway production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. The role gave him valuable stage experience and helped establish him as a young performer who could handle a recognizable character in a professional production. His career also included music. In 1968, Burghoff was the drummer for a band called The Relatives. The group had Linda Carter as its singer. Carter would later become a well-known actress. The band opened at the Sahara Hotel and Casino Lounge in Las Vegas, Nevada, where they performed for 3 months. Burghoff and Carter remained friends after their time with the band. Years later, they appeared together in an episode of Carter's television series, The New Adventures of Wonder Woman. Burghoff appeared in the 1978 episode, The Man Who Wouldn't Tell. By then, his acting career had already taken him to a much bigger opportunity. That opportunity came in 1970 when Burghoff made his feature film debut in Robert Altman's MASH. The film followed medical personnel working at a mobile Army surgical hospital during the Korean War. Burghoff played Walter Radar O'Reilly, a company clerk whose character would soon become one of the most recognizable parts of the MASH story. When the television version of MASH began in 1972, Burghoff returned as Radar. Several actors from the original movie later appeared as guest performers on the television series, but Burghoff was the only actor from the film to continue as a regular member of the television cast. His role also changed as the television series developed. In the movie, Radar was portrayed as a lone, darker, and somewhat sardonic character. The television series moved in a different direction. The doctors and other main characters became more developed, and Radar was shaped into a much more innocent and naive figure. This change helped Burghoff create a character who stood apart from the others. Radar was surrounded by people who understood the harsh situation they were living through, but he often approached events from a simpler point of view. His innocence became one of the important parts of his character. Burghoff's performance made Radar one of the central figures in the series. As company clerk, Radar handled important duties around the unit, but his role went beyond paperwork. His character became closely connected to the other members of the camp and helped give the series a different kind of personality. The role also brought Burghoff major recognition. He received 6 Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a comedy series for his work on MASH. In 1977, he won the Emmy for the role. His co-star Alan Alda accepted the award on his behalf. By that point, Burghoff had built a career that reached from theater and music to film and television. His work before MASH had given him experience in different forms of entertainment, but Radar O'Reilly became the role that defined his television career. What made the part especially important was the way Burghoff developed Radar over time. The character did not remain exactly as he had been in the original film. Instead, the television series gave Burghoff the opportunity to create a softer and more innocent version of Radar. That change allowed the character to fit naturally into the different style of the television show. Burghoff remained with MASH for the first 7 seasons. During that time, Radar became one of the best-known characters in the series, and Burghoff became strongly associated with the role. For Burghoff, Radar was more than just another acting role. It became the character most closely connected to his name and the part that placed him at the center of MASH's television history. But he had to leave it all. Why? Stick around to find out. The man behind Radar's many talents. Gary Burghoff became famous for playing Radar O'Reilly on MASH, but his life outside television included many different interests and skills. Acting was only one part of his life. Away from the screen, he developed a love for wildlife, music, fishing, painting, and stamp collecting. These interests gave him a very different life from the one audiences saw on television. One of Burghoff's interests is wildlife. He is a self-taught amateur wildlife painter and also became qualified to handle injured wildlife in California. His interest in animals gave him another way to spend his time away from acting. Instead of being known only for a television character, he also developed skills connected to the natural world. Music was another important part of his life. Burghoff worked as a professional jazz drummer and led a trio called the We Three. His experience as a drummer also became part of his work on MASH. This can be seen clearly in the episode Showtime. Radar is shown playing a drum solo, but the performance was not added later by another musician. Burghoff was actually playing the drums himself. His real musical ability was therefore included directly in the episode. He also played drums in other MASH episodes. In Bulletin Board, he can be seen playing during the picnic scene. He also appeared behind the drums in the no-talent show scene in Dear Dad, again. These moments gave viewers a chance to see a skill that Burghoff already had outside his acting career. His interest in fishing went even further. Burghoff became an inventor and developed fishing equipment designed to help attract fish toward a boat. His invention, known as Chum Magic, received 2 United States patents, numbered 5,117,592 and 5,235,774. Fishing was clearly more than a simple hobby for him. He also developed other inventions connected to everyday items and fishing. These included a toilet seat, lifting handle, and a different type of fishing pole. His inventions added another unusual part to a career that had already included acting, music, and wildlife. Burghoff also became a philatelist, meaning someone who collects and studies postage stamps. His interest in stamps became serious enough that in 1993, he was asked to help select a United States postage stamp for hunters. Away from these hobbies and interests, Burghoff also had a family life that went through major changes. He married Janet Gale in 1971. They had one daughter together, but the marriage ended in 1979, shortly after he left MASH. His decision to leave the show had been strongly connected to his desire to spend more time with his family. The demanding work schedule had made it difficult for him to be as available as he wanted. The California brush fire that came dangerously close to his home while he was away filming had also made him think more seriously about being present for his family. After his first marriage ended, Burghoff eventually married again. In 1985, he married Elizabeth Bostrom. They had 2 sons together. Their marriage lasted for 20 years before ending in 2005. Burghoff, therefore, had 3 children from his 2 marriages. His family remained an important part of the choices he made throughout his life, especially when he decided how much time he wanted to spend working in entertainment. His career after MASH became much less constant than it had been during the television series. He appeared in selected projects and continued developing his interests, but he eventually spent many years away from the entertainment industry. Then, in 2010, Burghoff came out of retirement to appear in the film Daniel's Lot. The movie marked his return to acting after his long break from the industry. His return was another reminder that Burghoff never had only one identity. To television viewers, he was Radar O'Reilly. To others, he was a drummer, painter, fisherman, inventor, wildlife handler, and stamp collector. Each of these interests became part of the life he built outside the MASH. What makes his story interesting is how different his private interests were from the image many viewers had of him. Radar was known as the young company clerk in a military hospital, while Burghoff spent his own time working with music, art, wildlife, fishing equipment, and stamps. Burghoff's story also shows why leaving MASH was such an important decision for him. He wanted time for his family, and later he built a life around interests that existed far beyond television. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.